It's an honor, actually, to be the one that pops up on someone's mind when they hear the word sanctuary. So thank you. I had a really meaningful time distilling all the places that my mind goes when I was thinking about this word and how to talk about it, how to go where I would go with it, because I tend to go a lot of different places. So I decided to talk about sanctuary as a place that we can find in relationship. You know, so much of my life actually is, I'm a therapist as well as a collaborative artist. So everything I do is about being in a relationship. And I got excited about thinking about how we find refuge in closeness and intimacy and the relationships that we're a part of. And what are we seeking refuge from exactly when we're finding that in relationship? And what does it look like? So I'm mostly going to be offering a little peek into my relationship with my sister, which is a sanctuary I've been in my whole life, and how we've created sanctuary for each other over the years, because it's changed in important ways. And a little bit about how, you know, the depth and the quality that we have in our relationship nourishes the art that we make, and we hope makes it so that our art is nourishing. That's sort of a cycle that we're in. And I'm going to be sharing some of the art that we've made kind of as chapter headings to sort of keep me on track, because I'm going to probably open up more doors than I can walk through right now. And so my closing thoughts, I had a thought this morning, like when no, they're not now. I'm just saying after all of that, that was it. I'm hoping that the closing thoughts can be like opening thoughts for like where this conversation can go once I'm done being microphoned and we're all just thinking about it and talking about it. So this is, if you can't read the text, this says, beside time, we make a circle. And sometime when I'm not on a time limit, we can talk about what beside time means and like how to get there. But it turns out that circles, I just learned, are the sanctuaries of geometry. And that when we look at circles and when we're in circles, our nervous systems actually start to calm down and relax, like protected from the sharp, pointy angles of the world. And we can't get into a literal circle together, but I'd like to begin by using just our own subjective experience and our imagination to imagine that we're actually all stepping into a circle together for the duration of the morning. This is a piece called In Recognition of Harm Done. And for me, first things first, I am a white person with a microphone right now being asked to talk about safety. So I'm talking about safety with the experience of being in a body that is profoundly safe and protected in our society. And the safety that I experience as a baseline is, it's like the air I breathe, and it's pervasive and it's invisible. And I believe that by making it explicit, by naming it, and by making it not invisible, but actually visible, it's one of my many responsibilities in our collective journey to disrupting and permanently dismantling white supremacy. Karina and I, my sister and I, have always been close and have always been sanctuary for each other. But the thing about the word sanctuary is that it actually implies danger. It implies that there are unsafe circumstances that we are needing refuge from. And that was absolutely the case in our family and our home growing up. We come from two long lines of creative and brilliant and funny and interesting people who have dutifully carried boatloads of trauma generation after generation after generation. And our parents definitely did better than their parents. But the landscape that we grew up in was not safe. It wasn't emotionally safe or psychologically safe, and sometimes not physically safe. And so we flocked to each other and to our imaginations and to the worlds that we made together. And make-believe and stories and backyard and basements and dolls and, we established something together that was safe, even in the midst of really unconscious and unsafe circumstances. And it worked. We grew up, we went in sort of different directions, but every time we met back up, every time we reconnected, we found that place. Like our relationship had created a place for us that felt safe, and it lasted throughout the years. So we're going to fast forward to everything is unfolding perfectly. Fast forward, it's 2011, and I've been painting, and my sister's already kind of a professional artist and illustrator, and we decide for the first time to creatively collaborate and make art together, and decided to make a calendar for the 2012 year. And we had fun, and it was fairly well received, so we decided to keep at it. And right now is 12 years in. So for 12 years, we've been making 12 collaborative original images each year. And we have like 144 things that we've made together. And our favorite ones are like turned into prints and postcards and magnets and stickers. And in this really, really small business way, we've got like national distribution and national audience. So it's like whatever we made as kids, like worked for us, like whatever we're doing as adults is also kind of working. That's the feeling that we get from it. But to get from the original sanctuary, the original relationship, to the one that we're in now has taken an enormous amount of hard work in terms of how we relate to each other. This one's one of my favorites. Why not fall apart? So the first 3 years, I think, of our collaboration especially, we bumped up against the shape that we were in as we related to each other. And that we had been shaped by sort of an adaptive sanctuary, the sanctuary that was adapting to this sort of abusive system around us. And we realized that what we learned in that dynamic was directly in the way of actually creating a really inspired and safe, interesting, collaborative relationship. And so we had to break down what we had learned, because what we had learned was only actually going to keep us in the same shape. And we wanted to make something new, and we wanted to have new ideas. And we actually, more than anything, we just wanted it to feel better. It was feeling hard relationally to keep coming up against like what we call like sister stuff, like sister dynamics coming up. So we had to kind of break it apart. And what we did, I'm going to distill, because it's like 12 years of relational process, into two particular things that I think are easy to relate. One of them was we learned how to do something that had not been modeled for us as children, which was to commit to a practice of being really curious about the other person's experience, even if, maybe especially if we knew it was different than our own. And that can be hard to do, period, but it can be really hard to do if that wasn't done for you when you were a kid in your family. So we really we grew each other up in that practice. And by doing that again and again and again, you actually start to build a profound trust in the relationship. We could trust that I could trust that my experience, it was intense, that it was someone was going to be curious about it. They were going to be curious about it, so I could pause and be curious about theirs. And just this incredible, I almost want to say lubrication. There's this fluidity to our relationship because we know that and can trust that about each other. And that the trust that gets built there is just a kind of amazing foundation to build on. The other piece, so I always pause before saying this because it's like a big old thing that I'm trying to put into one sentence. We made it a practice in our relationship, particularly in our professional creative collaboration, to reorient or orient. We often have to reorient, but to choose that our orientation for making art together, the whole reason we do any of our art is to learn how to love each other better. That's just the whole point of it. And what that means is that the point is not to sell it or to make it something that you guys are going to like or to make money off it. I mean, we do those things, but that has to not be the point. And so as we've done this year after year, our business has grown, and the level of dependency that we have on it has grown a little bit, and it becomes harder and harder to let that go, or it becomes easier and easier to have feelings of fear or control that come up when you're like, oh my gosh, this is my livelihood. What if we don't make a good calendar? I mean, all the stuff that can come up in that process. Multiple times every year, we come back to that reorientation. We're like, maybe we're not making a calendar. Maybe we're not making art professionally ever again. And instead, we are going to become curious about what this particular image that we're working on has to show us about how to love each other better and how to be closer. And what that does is it actually connects us back to like the seed of the sanctuary that we were in as kids. Like a lot of the way that we learned how to relate to each other as children, we had to break down, but there was some thread there that we've managed to maintain. And in that space, it's just magic. Like when we reorient in that way, all of a sudden we are having fun. We are coming up with new ideas, being like, oh my gosh, we could do this. This really bubbly sister kind of treehouse feeling is happening. And so most of the art that we've put out in the world has come from that space, and we've protected that space. And when it feels like we're making art not from that space, we reorient and come back to there and then make what we make. That's kind of like one way of talking about what we do. Another way of talking about what we do is like we feel our feelings together. It's just a kind of huge commitment to be feeling what we're feeling together and to pause any process that we're in if a feeling is coming up that we actually need to understand more. And then we get to find out what we're feeling, we get to name it, have it be witnessed, and then the feeling moves. Like it moves. The old feeling is there, it comes up, and then it moves. And I think it's when the feeling moves that we actually start to get that space and that capacity to be like, oh my gosh, we could do something else. We could feel a new thing. We could have a new thought. We can like open up to some new possibility. And I chose this one because grief is it's like the one. It's like the big one we come back to again and again. And it makes sense because it's like the other side of love. And so if we're committing to loving each other in a way, we're also kind of committing to being in a grief process together, because I think the two of those experiences are just woven together in our hearts. To sing a future not yet known. This is the part where I imagine myself like pulling threads from a lot of different directions. This is where my closing is actually kind of an opening. I'm like, see how this happens. This has happened differently every time I've practiced. And sometimes when I finish, I feel really excited, and sometimes I'm crying a lot. So we're gonna see what happens. I wanna come back to the word sanctuary. When I think about words, this is maybe a little strange, but I think about eating them. I think about swallowing them and like breaking them apart into their root bits and kind of understanding and digesting like what these words mean. And with sanctuary, like the main root is right there. It's sanctus, which is holy, it's sacred. And the word is a place. The word suggests a place where we feel safe. So I'm sitting with like safety and holiness. And there's a little bit of tension there for me because I think that our understanding of safety, especially in a white experience, our idea of safety is often one of comfort, where we are not getting pushed out of our comfort zone. We're feeling nice and cozy. We're not getting too activated. But the word holy, where my mind goes when I think about sacred is life, that life is sacred, that life is holy. And life, it's not comfortable. Life is full of cycles of growth and decay and love and loss and all kinds of really intense experiences. And so when I think about sanctuary, I like to think about a space where it could be safe for us to have the whole sacred experience of our emotional life and of our lives together, and relationships as the place that offer that. That's where we offer that to each other. Like, I want you to be whole. I'm going to hold this for you because I want you to be whole, and I want to be able to tolerate the full spectrum of your emotions and know that I can have the full spectrum of my emotions. And so my sister and I, it's like we cracked the code. It's like, whatever, we're still doing it. It's still messy. But that's the kind of the cracking the code is like, it's allowed to be messy. We're allowed to get uncomfortable together. It's safe to be uncomfortable together. And what we did is kind of this microcosm where it's like we inherited this unconscious, repetitive, ancestral, traumatic thing, and then figured out how to kind of pivot with intention and pivot with courage and practice and build something new. And so I don't have enough time to really go into the state of the world right now, but I'm just gonna take us there in few words and maybe just make a direct correlation between long-standing, unconscious, regurgitated patterns of behavior that are causing a lot of harm. This is where I start crying. So I think that on some level, I'm ending on like a rallying cry for more relational sanctuary, because here's what I think, is that I think that it's really easy to be alive right now, to look at the state of things and be like, I have no idea how to get out of this. I want to get out of this. I don't know how to do it different. I don't know how to even imagine another way of being. And like, what Corinne and I have figured out is that when we feel the feelings, old feelings, and actually let them move, that creates this space for like new ideas and new feelings and opening up to a world of possibility and imagination. And so I think my dream where I was landing with this is like sanctuary in relationships, so that we can all like move the stuff, like move the feelings that are getting in the way of us imagining whatever else could be possible for us here. So I think that's it. I think that's where I'm going to end. Thank you. I love questions.
Loves questions. I'm sorry.
Can you just talk a little bit about the medium of the pictures?
So they're painted in gouache, and the way that my sister and I have worked 99% of the time is we come up with an idea together, and then they draw it, and I paint it. And so it's actually like a lot like a continuation of what we did as we were kids. Like they would just like make up a whole world that I could be the lead character in. Not that I'm the lead character in this, but it's like they have a tendency to build structures for me to like kind of express myself through. So they'll just draw it out, and then because we're not near each other, I will print it out on watercolor paper and then paint it in my home. Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say, is the language with, before, during, after?
That was mine.
All of the above.
So who's creating? Are you?
Oh, the language is, highly collaborative. Yeah. And can happen at any point. Sometimes the words are like, oh yeah, what is that gonna look like? And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna say?
I think we have a question right here.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi. I was wondering if you could talk more about like the physical experience of feeling in that sanctuary place that makes it a little different from just kind of being connected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that my way of maybe my way of answering that is by saying that my way of answering that is probably going to be different than anybody else's way of answering that, because I think it's a really intimate space. And for me and my sister, it's got a quality to it that's we feel the presence of support that is bigger than just us. So I think that's also another piece of the holiness of it, even though that's not a word I typically use for it. But there's maybe one way of understanding the holy is that it is bigger than us. And so I know that we're there because the degree to which I relax and feel ease and pleasure and joy in the process is sort of equal to the level of sort of trusting that I'm being carried or held by something that I don't have to put any effort into maintaining, actually. So, it's a lot like what you could imagine, what I imagine as a therapist, right? Like when I imagine those child states where it's like when you're in an environment that is safe enough, you get to drift, you get to imagine, like you might not even know that you're safe because what you're really experiencing is freedom, So it's a lot like that, like a feeling of freedom, I think. Mm-hmm.
Your question?
Yes, can you talk a little bit more about the besides time?
Yeah.
Sorry, could you say that?
Can I talk a little bit more about the beside time quote? Like, how much time do you have? So this is maybe a funny way to talk about it is that my sister and I were once, I think they were in some like art accountability thing, and it was like with a whole bunch of like MFA like fancy people that were all like using this like language, and my sister was like trying to figure out how to talk about what we do, and their partner was like, you make time-based art, like you do this like long-term time-based installation art where everyone's turning the page at the same time on the calendar, right? So we've kind of joked about that, but at the same time we are often confused about what year it is, because when it's 2023, we're making 2024, and like things get a little confusing. But also, I think my sister and I like to just nerd out about like the subjective experiences of time and space. And I am, maybe you've noticed, like a little bit more on like the hummingbird rate of things a lot of times, like especially when I'm talking, I can have a lot of energy. And so to me, beside time is like where I imagine it a little bit like being alongside the river or like behind the waterfall, where like obviously time is moving and I'm not totally separate from it, but I'm getting to have an experience where I can imagine that I'm connected to past and present and future all at once. And I think there's a lot of resourcing there. There's a lot of there's ancestors, there's future ancestors, there's, old ideas, there's new ideas, right? There's all kinds of stuff happening there. And I think we kind of need to get there sometimes to recharge.
Got time for a couple more. Tom?
Yeah, he very efficiently made me feel great joy and delight, and also distress and anger. And so I had to think, where does this stem from?
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably true of all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And I wondered, what was your was there a defining moment when you were able to embrace both ends with your sister?
That's a good question.
I don't know if this answers your question directly, but the image that came to my mind is like trying to build a sandcastle, and then it's like a little too close to the water, or it didn't have enough of the stuff in it, and it gets washed away again, and then we're gonna build it again, and then it gets washed away. But I think the defining moment was actually like that there was a return again and again and again to a shared intention, and to I'm willing to feel what I don't want to feel, to see what's on the other side with you, So I think that and then eventually something happened that I was like, oh, it didn't get washed away, right? Now we're really building something. Now it's really going.
Yes.
Fascinated by what you just said about the fact that you all are doing your calendars a year for a year ahead. And so my question is, what are you learning from the art as the next year unfolds?
Yeah.
Art teaching you about next
Yeah.
year, and what realizations do you have where you go, now I see what that grows kind of.
That happens a lot, and it's trippy. It's a little weird. The pandemic, 2020, when we were making it, we were like, next year's gonna be a lot. We don't even know. To be fair, my sister's also an astrologer, so they have this language of looking into time that's, you know, that is what it is. I mean, more than anything, we just see it as a language of like reading things. But so that helps a little bit, but sometimes we don't know, and then it's the month, and we're like, of course, like, oh, that's so cool. It's like a really fun way to have our process talk to us through time. But 2020, we actually kind of knew that something was happening, and we didn't know what it was going to be. And as soon as lockdown happened, like I think as the COVID started to spread, but it wasn't quite here yet, it was the month and the spell was the depths rise to meet us, I think. And then when lockdown happened, it was like stand brave, you know, and then it was like stay close. I mean, it was just like all of these really strange things that were very fitting. So yeah, we're just kind of, it's one of the things we're delighted by is that we don't really know what's going on, and then we find out that we did know what was going on. That's it. Thank you.
Give it up for Joe.
Thank you.